Welcome back. Have you ever wondered how much your old wheat pennies could be worth today? In this video, we're going beyond just one coin. We'll start with the famous 1943 steel wheat penny, but we'll also explore other valuable Lincoln wheat pennies from different years and mint marks that collectors continue to search for. From rare dates and low mintage coins to unusual varieties, mint errors, and high-grade examples, there are many different factors that can make a wheat penny interesting and potentially valuable. We'll compare the 1943 steel wheat penny with other wheat pennies and discuss their current 2026 market values so you know what details to look for in your own collection. So grab your old wheat pennies, check those dates and mint marks, and stay until the end, because one of these small copper or steel Lincoln cents could be worth far more than its 1 cent face value. Let's get started. First up, the 1917 Lincoln wheat penny with no mint mark is exactly the kind of historic US coin that can attract collectors because of its age, classic design, and surviving condition. This coin was produced at the Philadelphia Mint, which did not place a mint mark on its cents. The 1917 Philadelphia issue had a substantial mintage of 196,429,785 pieces, so the date itself is not considered an extremely rare key date. However, age, preservation, strike quality, color, and unusual varieties can make individual examples much more desirable. Current reference values show that ordinary circulated examples generally remain in the low dollar range, while sharply preserved examples can move into substantially higher prices. The Lincoln cent began in 1909 and was designed by Victor David Brenner, with Abraham Lincoln appearing on the obverse and two wheat ears decorating the reverse. The design was historically important because Lincoln became the first U.S. president to appear on a regularly circulating American coin. By 1917, the Lincoln wheat cent had already been circulating for several years and had become a familiar part of everyday American commerce. The reverse wheat design remained in production until 1958, making the 1917 coin part of the first generation of Lincoln cents. For collectors today, a 1917 penny therefore represents an early chapter in one of the longest-running and most recognizable coin series in American history. One of the first things collectors should understand about this particular coin is that the absence of a mint mark is completely normal. A 1917 Lincoln cent without a mint mark was struck at Philadelphia. The Denver Mint and San Francisco Mint produced 1917 Lincoln cents with their respective D and S mint marks, while Philadelphia cents carried no mint mark. Therefore, you should not automatically assume that a 1917 penny without a mint mark is an error or an exceptionally rare coin. The location of the mint mark is also important. On Lincoln cents of this era, mint marks appear below the date on the obverse when they are present. The 1917 Philadelphia Lincoln wheat cent was made from the traditional bronze composition of approximately 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc. It measures about 19 millimeters across and weighs approximately 3.11 grams when uncirculated and within normal specifications. On the front, you will see Abraham Lincoln's portrait facing right, with the inscriptions Liberty, in God We Trust, and the date 1917. On the reverse are the famous wheat ears surrounding the words 1 cent and United States of America, along with EPLUOBUSUNUM. These design elements make the coin easy to identify and give it tremendous historical character compared with modern cents. Age alone does not automatically make a coin extremely valuable, and this is especially important when discussing the 1917 no mint mark Lincoln cent. Because nearly 196.5 million were struck at Philadelphia, many worn examples have survived. Reference values updated in February 2026 place ordinary examples around $0.61 in good condition, $0.74 in very good, $0.93 in fine, and about $2.50 in very fine, while extremely fine examples can be around $6.25 in the cited guide. These figures demonstrate an important collecting principle. Condition can make a dramatic difference. A heavily worn 1917 penny may be inexpensive, while an unusually well-preserved specimen can command considerably more. When examining your 1917 penny, pay close attention to the amount of original detail that remains. A coin described as being in an old or heavily circulated condition may show significant wear on Lincoln's hair, cheek, jawline, and the lettering. On the reverse, the wheat ears and central lettering may also be worn or partially flattened. Collectors generally pay more for coins that retain stronger details, cleaner surfaces, fewer scratches, and better overall eye appeal. At the upper end, uncirculated coins become much more interesting, because they have avoided the heavy wear associated with decades of circulation. A current reference gives approximately $19 for a U-50 and $22 for M-60, with an M-63 example listed around $38, illustrating how preservation can change the value dramatically. There is another reason collectors should examine a 1917 Lincoln cent carefully. 1917 is one of the dates associated with double-die varieties. PCGS specifically lists 1917 among Lincoln cent dates where doubling is found. This does not mean every 1917 penny has valuable doubling, and ordinary machine damage or postmint scratches should not be confused with a genuine doubled die. A legitimate variety requires careful examination of the lettering, date, and other design elements, preferably with magnification and comparison to recognized references. If a coin appears to show unusual doubling, it can be worthwhile to have the variety professionally attributed, rather than assuming that every unusual mark represents a valuable mint error. This is where the story becomes especially interesting for collectors. A normal, heavily circulated 1917 Philadelphia penny should not automatically be advertised as a coin worth hundreds or thousands of dollars. The available market references show that typical examples can be worth less than a few dollars depending on grade. However, exceptional coins can become much more valuable when they combine strong preservation, attractive original color, unusual varieties, or significant minting characteristics. The broader Lincoln cent series contains famous varieties that have sold for very large amounts, but those prices should not be transferred automatically to a standard 1917 no-mint mark cent. In other words, if you discover a 1917 penny, examine it carefully, but keep realistic expectations about its value. If you have a 1917 Lincoln Wheat cent in an old condition, start by checking the date, confirming that it really reads 1917. Next, inspect the area below the date and remember that a missing mint mark is normal for the Philadelphia issue. Then examine Lincoln's portrait for remaining detail and look at the reverse wheat ears for sharpness. Use a magnifying glass to inspect the date and lettering for possible doubling or other unusual characteristics. Avoid cleaning the coin, because cleaning can leave scratches and unnatural surfaces that may reduce collector appeal. If your coin appears unusually sharp, attractive, or potentially varieties-related, professional authentication and grading can provide a much more reliable assessment than simply comparing it with an online asking price. So what should you remember about the 1917 Lincoln Wheat penny with no mint mark in today's market? First, it is a genuine historic Philadelphia minted Lincoln cent, and its age of more than a century gives it undeniable collectible interest. Second, the no-mint mark characteristic is normal and does not by itself make the coin an error. Third, the coin's condition is extremely important. Worn examples can be worth around the low dollar range, while better preserved examples can rise into the tens of dollars according to current reference values. Special varieties or exceptional high-grade examples can command more, but those require specific evidence rather than hype. So if you find a 1917 wheat penny in an old collection, don't spend it without checking it first. Look closely at the date, surfaces, wheat reverse, and possible doubling. And remember that the real treasure may be the history preserved inside this tiny copper coin. Next up, the 1927 Lincoln Wheat penny with no mint mark, a fascinating United States 1-cent coin that has survived for nearly a century. At first glance, a 1927 Philadelphia penny may look like an ordinary old coin, but its age, condition, color, strike quality, and possible die varieties can make a major difference to collectors. The 1927 Lincoln cent was struck at the Philadelphia Mint, and PCGS records a substantial mintage of 144,440,000 pieces. Because Philadelphia cents of this period normally carried no mint mark, the absence of a letter beneath the date is not automatically an error or an indication of extreme rarity. What makes a high-grade example especially interesting is its preservation. A genuinely uncirculated 1927 cent can be dramatically more desirable than an ordinary worn example, because most coins from the 1920s spent decades being handled, spent, carried, and exposed to the environment. So if you have a 1927 wheat penny that still looks unusually sharp, this is exactly the type of coin that deserves a much closer inspection. The 1927 Lincoln Wheat penny belongs to one of the most famous American coin series ever produced. The Lincoln cent was introduced in 1909 to commemorate the 100th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth, and the design was created by sculptor Victor David Brenner. The obverse features Lincoln's portrait facing right, while the reverse displays 2 wheat ears surrounding the inscriptions 1 cent and United States of America, with the motto EPLURBUSUNUM above. This famous reverse design gave the series its popular nickname, the wheat penny or wheat cent. By 1927, the Lincoln cent had already been in circulation for almost 2 decades, making the coin part of an important period in American history. These pennies passed through an America that was changing rapidly, from the economic expansion of the 1920s to the difficult years that followed. Every surviving 1927 cent therefore carries not only numismatic interest, but also a connection to everyday American life, nearly 100 years ago. One of the first things collectors notice on a 1927 Lincoln cent is the absence of a mint mark. If your coin has no letter beneath the date, that does not mean the mint mark has been accidentally removed. In 1927, cents struck at Philadelphia were intentionally produced without a mint mark. PCGS identifies the regular 1927 Lincoln cent as a Philadelphia issue with a mintage of 144,440,000 coins. This is an important point for anyone searching through old pennies, because internet videos and listings sometimes describe every no mint mark coin as an error or rare variety. That is not correct for this date. A genuine 1927 Philadelphia cent with no mint mark is a normal issue. However, normal issue does not mean every example has the same value. The difference can come from grade, surface quality, original color, strike, eye appeal, and recognized varieties. So when examining your coin, do not focus only on the missing letter. Instead, look at the entire coin, and especially its condition. Now we come to the most exciting part of this coin, uncirculated condition. An uncirculated coin is one that shows little or no evidence of being used in commerce. On a Lincoln cent from 1927, that can be particularly significant because nearly a century of age gives collectors very few opportunities to find coins with exceptional original surfaces. A coin graded in the mint state range can retain details that disappear quickly on circulated examples, including sharper hair details on Lincoln, stronger lettering, cleaner fields, and more defined wheat lines on the reverse. However, simply looking shiny does not automatically make a coin uncirculated. Cleaning, polishing, artificial coloring, scratches, environmental damage, and other problems can affect both appearance and value. Professional grading companies examine these characteristics carefully. For a collector, the ideal 1927 example is not merely an old penny that looks bright. It is an authentic coin with original surfaces, minimal marks, strong detail, and attractive color. The difference between an ordinary-looking coin and an exceptional mint state example can be substantial. Another major factor in the value of a 1927 Lincoln cent is its color designation. Copper coins naturally change color as they age, and professional grading commonly distinguishes between brown, and red examples. A brown coin has largely lost its original reddish appearance, while a red-brown coin retains a mixture of original red and brown coloration. A red example preserves much more of the original copper-red appearance and can command a significant premium when combined with a high grade. PCGS separately catalogues 1927 cents in BN, RB, and RD categories, demonstrating how important color is to collectors. This is one reason two 1927 pennies with apparently similar grades can sell for very different prices. A high-grade red example with beautiful original surfaces may attract serious competition, while a lower-grade brown example may be much more affordable. Therefore, if you believe you have an uncirculated 1927 penny, examine the color under good lighting and avoid attempting to clean or polish it. When examining a 1927 wheat penny, collectors should carefully inspect both sides of the coin. On the obverse, look closely at the date, Lincoln's hair, cheek, jawline, lettering, and the open fields around the portrait. On the reverse, pay particular attention to the wheat ears, the lettering, the rim, and the overall sharpness of the strike. Small marks can be important in high-grade coins because mint state examples are often separated by subtle differences in preservation. Collectors should also watch for possible die varieties. PCGS lists 1927 double die obverse varieties, including examples in brown, and red designations. A genuine double die characteristic is very different from ordinary machine doubling or damage, so suspected varieties should be examined carefully and, when appropriate, authenticated by an experienced specialist or grading service. The important lesson is simple: do not assume that every unusual line, doubling effect, scratch, or distortion is a valuable error. Authenticity and attribution are critical. So how much can a 1927 Lincoln Wheat Penny be worth today? The answer depends heavily on grade and color, and it is important not to claim that every 1927 no-mint mark penny is worth hundreds or thousands of dollars. Public auction records provide a much more realistic picture. PCGS records a $40,800 auction record for a 1927 MS68 RD, sold by Heritage Auctions on January 19, 2025. That is an exceptional result for an exceptional coin, not the normal value of a circulated 1927 cent. Another PCGS recorded 1927 example graded MS67 sold for $1,426, while the listed PCGS price guide value shown on that record was $1,850. An MS66 example has also appeared in auction records for hundreds of dollars. These records show why condition matters so much. A common-looking worn coin should not be presented as a $1,000 treasure simply because it carries the date 1927. The big money belongs to exceptional examples, particularly high-grade coins with desirable color, strong surfaces, and verified quality for a YouTube audience searching their collections. It is useful to understand that the value of a 1927 Philadelphia wheat penny can range widely. A heavily circulated example may have only modest collector value, while a better preserved specimen can bring considerably more. As the grade moves upward into the mint state levels, prices can enter the hundreds of dollars, and for particularly strong examples, the thousands. The finest certified pieces can reach dramatically higher auction levels, as demonstrated by the $40,800 PCGS auction record for an MS68 RD coin. Therefore, a claim such as, "Your 1927 penny is automatically worth thousands," would be misleading. A better way to describe the opportunity is that exceptional 1927 cents can be worth hundreds to thousands of dollars, with elite certified examples potentially reaching much higher auction prices. The exact market price on any particular day depends on grade, color, certification, eye appeal, rarity within the grade, and buyer demand. For anyone holding a suspected uncirculated example, professional authentication and grading can be worthwhile if the coin appears genuinely high quality. If you believe you have discovered a valuable 1927 Lincoln Wheat Penny, the first rule is simple: do not clean it. Cleaning an old copper coin can permanently damage its original surface and may reduce its desirability to collectors. Instead, handle the coin by its edges and keep it in a suitable protective holder. Examine it under good lighting using magnification, but avoid scraping, rubbing, or applying chemicals. Compare the coin's design and characteristics with reliable references, and remember that a missing mint mark on a 1927 cent is normal for Philadelphia rather than an automatic error. PCGS records also show that professional grading separates coins into different conditions and color categories, which can have very different market results. If the coin appears unusually sharp, has attractive original red color, or seems to show a legitimate double-die characteristic, professional evaluation may be appropriate. Certification can provide an independent assessment of authenticity and grade, which is especially important when a coin potentially has substantial value. The 1927 Lincoln Wheat Penny with no mint mark is a fascinating piece of American numismatic history, but its real story is more interesting than simply calling it a rare penny. The Philadelphia issue had a large mintage of 144,440,000, so the absence of a mint mark alone does not make it rare. What can make a particular 1927 penny truly special is exceptional preservation, high mint state grading, attractive original copper color, strong strike quality, and potentially a recognized variety. The market records prove that extraordinary examples can bring impressive prices. PCGS records $1,426 for an MS67 example and an incredible $40,800 for an MS68 RD example. So if you have a 1927 wheat penny sitting in an old collection, coin album, inherited box, or group of vintage cents, take a closer look before dismissing it. You may not have a fortune simply because it is old, but a beautifully preserved, authenticated example can be a very desirable collector coin. And that is what makes searching old wheat pennies so exciting. Sometimes the difference between an ordinary 1-cent coin and a valuable numismatic treasure is found in the smallest details. Next up, the 1928 Lincoln Wheat Penny, a historic United States 1-cent coin with no mint mark, meaning it was struck at the Philadelphia Mint. At first glance, a worn 1928 wheat penny may look like an ordinary old copper coin, but its age, classic design, historical background, and collector demand make it an interesting piece for any Lincoln cent collection. The 1928 Philadelphia issue had a substantial mintage of 134,116,000 coins, so it is not considered a rare date in ordinary circulated condition. However, condition makes a dramatic difference. PCGS notes that the 1928 Philadelphia cent is common in circulated grades and becomes considerably more desirable in exceptionally high mint state grades. So if you have a 1928 penny in rough condition, you should not automatically assume that it is worth hundreds or thousands of dollars, but you also should not ignore it. The important question is what exactly you have, how much detail remains, whether there are unusual varieties or errors, and how the coin compares with certified examples. The 1928 wheat penny belongs to the famous Lincoln cent series, which began in 1909 and continued with the wheat reverse until 1958. The coin was designed by Victor David Brenner, whose portrait of Abraham Lincoln became one of the most recognizable designs in American coinage. On the obverse, Lincoln faces right, with the inscriptions Liberty, in God we trust, and the date appearing around his portrait. On the reverse are the two wheat ears surrounding the words 1 cent and United States of America, along with the motto EPLUOBUSUNUM. The design connected American history, national identity, and agriculture in a single small copper coin. By 1928, the design had already been circulating for nearly 2 decades, making this penny part of an important period in American numismatic history. The 1928 issue is especially interesting because it comes from an era when the United States was still using the traditional bronze composition for regular Lincoln cents. One of the first things collectors should understand is that the absence of a mint mark on a 1928 Lincoln cent is normal, not automatically an error. The 1928 no-mint mark Lincoln cent was struck at the Philadelphia Mint, which traditionally did not place a mint mark on its cents. PCGS identifies the 1928 no-mint mark coin as a Philadelphia issue with a mintage of 134,116,000 pieces. This means that if you look beneath the date and do not see a small d or s, that does not mean something is missing from your coin. Instead, it identifies the coin as the Philadelphia version. This distinction is extremely important because many people see a blank area beneath the date and assume the coin must be rare. In reality, the no-mint mark 1928 cent is the standard Philadelphia issue. The value comes primarily from condition, color, strike quality, originality, varieties, errors, and collector demand, not simply from the absence of a mint mark. The 1928 Lincoln Wheat Penny was made from the traditional bronze composition used for Lincoln cents of this era, approximately 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc. PCGS lists the coin at about 3.11 grams and 19 millimeters in diameter, with a plain edge. These specifications are useful when checking an unusual-looking coin. If you have a supposed 1928 cent that has a dramatically different weight, diameter, or appearance, it may deserve closer examination. However, collectors should be careful because circulation, corrosion, environmental damage, cleaning, or alterations can change a coin's appearance without making it a genuine mint error. The obverse should show Lincoln's portrait with the date 1928 clearly identifiable, while the reverse should display the familiar wheat ears. On a heavily worn or rough example, some of these details may be weak or partially missing. That does not necessarily mean the coin is fake. Decades of circulation can produce substantial wear. Now let's talk specifically about the rough condition mentioned for this coin. A heavily circulated 1928 wheat penny can show scratches, dark toning, surface marks, rim damage, corrosion, dirt, and significant loss of design detail. The word rough is important because condition is one of the biggest factors determining collectible value. A circulated 1928 Philadelphia cent is generally worth only a modest premium over face value. PCGS Lincoln Cent Guide gives the 1928 Philadelphia issue approximately $0 and 10 cents, $0 and 25 cents in good, $0 and 25 cents, $0 and 50 cents in fine, $1 and 50 cents in extra fine, and $5 and up in uncirculated, with actual market prices varying according to grade, color, eye appeal, and other factors. Therefore, a rough example should not be advertised as automatically being worth hundreds or thousands of dollars. The truly dramatic prices belong to exceptional specimens, especially coins with unusually high grades or desirable characteristics. This is where the story of the 1928 wheat penny becomes fascinating. The same date can have completely different values depending on condition. PCGS describes the 1928 Philadelphia cent as common in circulated grades and reasonably affordable through MS65, while higher grades become much more difficult to obtain. At the top of the market, an extraordinarily preserved MS68 red example achieved an auction record of $22,800 at Heritage Auctions on January 19, 2025, according to PCGS Coin Facts. That figure demonstrates why headlines about a 1928 penny selling for thousands of dollars can be misleading if they do not explain the grade. A worn coin from an old collection is not automatically comparable to a professionally graded, nearly flawless mint state example. For a rough 1928 penny, realistic values are generally much lower. But if you discover an unusually well-preserved example, then professional grading and authentication may become worth considering. Another major factor is the coin's color and surface quality. Professional grading services commonly distinguish between brown, and red copper coins. A circulated 1928 cent will usually have lost much of its original bright red appearance and may have developed brown or darker coloration over decades. A high-grade red example that preserves much of its original mint color can command substantially more than a similar-grade brown coin. PCGS auction information shows just how large the difference can become. Its 1928 BN listing records an auction result of $3,120 for an XF45 brown example in August 2025, while its red listing records the much higher $22,800 result for an exceptional MS68 RD specimen. These are not typical prices for ordinary 1928 pennies. They represent specific certified coins and specific market events. This is why collectors should examine the surfaces carefully and avoid cleaning the coin in an attempt to make it look brighter. Collectors should also inspect a 1928 wheat penny for unusual characteristics. Look carefully at the date, Lincoln's portrait, the lettering, the wheat stalks, the rim, and the overall strike. Signs of possible doubling, an unusual die characteristic, an off-center strike, a clipped planchet, or another genuine mint error could potentially make a coin more desirable. However, ordinary damage should not be confused with a mint error. Scratches, dents, corrosion, environmental discoloration, and damage caused after the coin left the mint are common on old circulated cents. A genuine error generally has characteristics that can be explained by the minting process and should be evaluated against recognized references. If something truly unusual appears on your 1928 cent, avoid polishing or altering it. Keeping the coin in its original condition allows an experienced dealer or grading service to evaluate it more accurately. So what could a 1928 no-mint mark wheat penny be worth today? The answer depends heavily on condition. For a rough, heavily circulated example, the realistic value may be only a small premium over 1 cent, potentially in the range of cents to a few dollars depending on its grade and collector demand. PCGS published guide places ordinary 1928 Philadelphia cents at approximately 10.25 cents in good, 25.50 cents in fine, $1.50 in extra fine, and $5 or more in uncirculated, while exceptional certified pieces can reach much higher levels. At the other end of the spectrum, documented auction records show that exceptional high-grade examples can reach thousands or even tens of thousands of dollars, such as the $22,800 MS68 RD record. So if your coin is genuinely rough, it would be inaccurate to claim that every 1928 no-mint mark penny is worth hundreds or thousands. The exciting possibility is that a coin that looks ordinary might deserve closer inspection if it contains a legitimate error, unusual variety, or an exceptionally high level of preservation. Finally, if you find a 1928 Lincoln Wheat penny with no mint mark, do not throw it away and do not clean it. First, confirm the date, then check the area beneath the date to verify that there is no D or S mint mark. Examine both sides under good lighting and look for remaining details: unusual doubling, striking abnormalities, major damage, and overall surface quality. Remember that the Philadelphia no mint mark issue had a large mintage of 134,116,000 coins, so the absence of a mint mark alone does not make it rare. The real opportunity is understanding condition and recognizing exceptional pieces. If your coin is heavily worn, its value will normally be modest. If it is unusually sharp, original, and well preserved, its value can rise dramatically. And if you believe you have a genuine mint error or an exceptionally high-grade example, professional authentication can provide a much more reliable answer than internet claims. The 1928 wheat penny is valuable not simply because it is old, but because it represents nearly a century of American history. And for collectors, sometimes the most exciting discovery begins with one small coin that has been sitting unnoticed for decades. So check your old jars, coin albums, inherited collections, and boxes of wheat pennies, because you never know what story your next 1928 Lincoln cent might tell. Next up, the 1943's Lincoln Wheat Cent was produced at the San Francisco Mint during World War II, when the United States was urgently conserving copper for military purposes. Unlike the traditional bronze cent struck before 1943, this one-year wartime issue was made from zinc-coated steel. The San Francisco Mint produced 191,550,000 of these cents, so the 1943's is not automatically rare simply because it is old. However, condition, original surfaces, varieties, errors, and professional certification can make particular examples much more desirable. The story of the 1943's steel penny begins with World War II. Copper was an important strategic material, used for ammunition, electrical equipment, communications equipment, and other wartime necessities. Because the government wanted to reduce the amount of copper being used in 1-cent coins, the U.S. Mint changed the cent's composition for 1943. The new planchet consisted of steel coated with zinc, producing the famous bright silver-gray appearance that separates the 1943 cents from the familiar brown copper Lincoln cents. This was an extraordinary change because the Lincoln cent had been made primarily from bronze for decades. The steel composition was intended as a temporary wartime solution, and the experiment lasted only for the 1943 coinage year. That makes the 1943 steel cent historically important even though millions were produced. One of the first details collectors should examine is the mint mark. The S below the date on the obverse identifies the San Francisco Mint. Philadelphia cents from 1943 did not carry a mint mark, while Denver used a D and San Francisco used an S. The 1943's had a substantial production of 191.55 million pieces. This means the S mint mark does not by itself make a normal 1943 steel cent worth hundreds or thousands of dollars. Instead, it helps identify exactly which version of the coin you have. Collectors then look at condition, strike quality, surface preservation, varieties, and possible errors. PCGS lists the standard 1943's as a zinc-coated steel cent with a 19mm diameter and a weight of approximately 2.7 grams. The design is the classic Lincoln Wheat Cent created by Victor David Brenner. On the obverse you will see Abraham Lincoln's portrait facing right, with the words Liberty and In God We Trust surrounding the design, along with the date 1943 and the S mint mark. Turn the coin over and you will find the famous wheat ears surrounding the denomination and the inscriptions United States of America, 1 cent, and EPLURBUSUNUM. The steel composition creates another major identifying feature. An authentic 1943 steel cent should have a gray or silvery appearance and should respond to a magnet because of its steel core. But collectors should be careful. Magnetism alone is not enough to prove authenticity, because altered or replated coins can also create confusing appearances. The weight, dimensions, surfaces, and overall diagnostics should be considered together. Now let's talk about the dusty condition mentioned for this coin. A dusty, dirty, circulated 1943's penny should not automatically be described as a rare coin worth thousands. In fact, most circulated 1943 steel cents are relatively common. PCGS specifically notes that although many people assume all 1943 steel cents are rare and valuable, they were struck in very large quantities and are generally inexpensive except in high uncirculated grades. The biggest problem with old steel cents is corrosion. Once the protective zinc coating becomes damaged or worn, the underlying steel can begin to rust. That is why some surviving examples show dark spots, reddish-brown corrosion, scratches, staining, or rough surfaces. If your coin looks dusty, resist the temptation to aggressively clean or polish it. Cleaning can permanently damage the original surface and potentially reduce collector interest. Condition is one of the most important factors in determining the market value of a 1943's steel penny. A heavily circulated example with scratches, corrosion, or damaged surfaces may be worth only a modest amount above face value, while a sharply struck, attractive uncirculated example can bring substantially more. Professional grading becomes especially important at the higher end because collectors want an independent assessment of the coin's condition. As a reference point, PCGS auction records show a 1943's graded MS-65 sold for $39 in 2019, while another MS66 example sold for $401 in 2020. These are specific historical auction results, not guaranteed current prices. The lesson is simple. Two 1943s pennies can look similar to a casual observer but have dramatically different values because of grade, surfaces, eye appeal, and certification. Yes, exceptional examples can reach the hundreds or even thousands of dollars, but this is where collectors must separate a normal coin from an extraordinary one. PCGS records an auction result of $138,000 for a 1943s cent graded a U58. But that famous result is associated with an unusual example and should not be interpreted as the normal value of a circulated 1943s steel cent. There are also significant varieties and errors connected with the 1943s issue. PCGS lists a 1943s bronze variety and a 1943s doubled die obverse, among other varieties. These unusual pieces can be dramatically more valuable than ordinary steel cents. This is why a valuable coin search should not stop simply because the coin looks old or dusty. The important question is whether it possesses a documented variety, genuine mint error, unusual composition, or exceptional grade. The 1943 steel cent is also famous because of the extremely rare 1943 bronze cent errors. During the transition to steel planchets, a small number of bronze planchets apparently remained in the production system, resulting in extraordinarily rare 1943 cents struck on bronze. These are not ordinary steel pennies and should not be confused with them. The 1943s bronze cent is especially famous, with only a very small number of confirmed examples known. Recent numismatic coverage has highlighted one of these legendary 1943s bronze cents returning to the market. This is the kind of discovery that can produce enormous auction prices, but it requires authentication because valuable 1943 bronze cents are heavily targeted by counterfeiting and alterations. So if someone believes their 1943s penny is bronze rather than steel, professional authentication is far more important than simply relying on color or a home test. If you discover a 1943s steel wheat penny in an old collection, jar, box, or inherited coin group, start by examining it carefully under good lighting. Confirm the 1943 date, locate the S-mint mark, inspect Lincoln's portrait, check the wheat reverse, and look closely for corrosion, scratches, unusual doubling, die characteristics, or evidence of alteration. You can also compare its weight and dimensions with known specifications. Do not clean the coin with chemicals, metal polish, abrasive materials, or household cleaners. Cleaning can leave hairlines and unnatural surfaces that collectors immediately recognize. If the coin appears unusually well preserved or seems to contain a genuine error or variety, consider having it evaluated by a reputable professional grading or authentication service. A dusty appearance does not necessarily mean the coin is worthless, but it also does not automatically make it rare. The true value comes from the coin's measurable characteristics and the prices collectors are actually willing to pay. So how much could a 1943s steel wheat penny be worth in today's 2026 market? The answer depends heavily on condition and variety. A normal circulated example generally does not belong in the hundreds or thousands of dollars category simply because it is a 1943s. PCGS describes the regular issue as common in many grades, while high-grade examples become increasingly desirable. Certified examples have demonstrated values ranging from relatively modest amounts in lower mint state grades to hundreds of dollars in stronger grades, while exceptional varieties or extraordinary errors can reach dramatically higher levels. Remember that auction records are historical results, not guarantees, and market prices can change with grade, certification, eye appeal, variety, provenance, and buyer demand. So if you have a dusty 1943s steel wheat penny, don't throw it away and don't clean it. Examine it carefully, protect it from further corrosion, and learn exactly what you have. This little wartime coin is not only a piece of American history, it is also one of the most recognizable and fascinating Lincoln cents ever produced. And if your example turns out to have an unusual variety, error, or exceptional grade, that is when the search can become truly exciting. Important note for viewers. Market values change with grade, certification, surface condition, color designation, variety, authenticity, and actual auction results. The figures and examples mentioned in this video are reference market information, not a guarantee that every 1943s steel penny will sell for those amounts. Thanks for watching.